Hey guys, before we get started with our interview this week, I just wanted to bring to your attention an upcoming event that I am a sponsor of and that is sponsoring my show for the next couple weeks. It is the Startup and Entrepreneur Networking event that will be taking place in Manhattan, and it's being organized by Michael Mara, who is the CEO and founder of the Meet Group. Welcome, Michael. Glad to have you back.
Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Stoked for this event that we have coming up in New York. It's going to be great.
Yes. And I just want to say, most of you have not heard Michael's interview yet because it will be posted in 2 weeks. So you'll really get an up close and personal idea of who he is and what he's doing with his organization. But today we're just going to quickly talk about the upcoming event, which is Startup and Entrepreneur Networking event in Manhattan on May 23rd. So Michael, tell us a little bit about this event and what we can expect.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. It's gonna be a great time. If you're an existing entrepreneur, or even if you're looking to just get into entrepreneurship, get into a startup, if you're an existing business owner, we really want to create a space and an event for everyone to come out, connect with like-minded people, find partners, do collaborations, joint ventures, all of that stuff. We've done a bunch in Pittsburgh. Now we're starting to expand out to other cities. We are hopefully going to be doing one every month in New York, and we really want to just bring out a great crowd. Entrepreneurs love connecting with other entrepreneurs, and when you get ambitious people and driven people in the same room, it's just a great time. So we've had a blast doing them, and we're looking forward to doing them in New York, and we cannot wait for everyone to come out. There's so many startups in New York that are really doing well, and then anyone who's looking to get into any of this kind of stuff, whether it be online or, a brick and mortar business, you're going to come out and meet successful entrepreneurs, investors, other people looking to start companies, college students. We have a wide audience range, and it's just a great time. And there's going to be, some drinks, some snacks, some food. It's totally free for everyone. It's going to be at a great location. Right on Broadway at a new co-working space called Spaces. Mm-hmm. And it's, we're so excited about it.
Yeah, it sounds exciting. I can't wait for the event. Guys, I'll be there as well. The Oh Hell No podcast will definitely be in the house. So I think it's going to be great. So it's in New York City on May 23rd from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And we will definitely keep you guys posted as to all of the details. And I will put these details in my show notes, and we will be pumping this information out there because we want you guys to get involved and get your businesses up and running and, have access to the resources that you need to keep your business up and running. So thank you so much, Michael, for sharing this information with us. And in 2 weeks, everyone will really get to know Michael Mara.
Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, we're glad to have your show and as a partner of the event. And, you'll get to, if you've never met Nicole, this will be a great opportunity for all of you fans and listeners to meet her in person. And it's going to be a great time. There's going to be a lot of cool people, a lot of interesting people. Everyone's going to be doing cool stuff. So we're super excited about it. And like she said, if you have any questions, reach out to her, reach out to me, whatever. You'll get my story when the episode goes live. But we're just trying to create a whole hub and experience for entrepreneurs and startups and bring everyone together.
Yes, that's awesome.
Welcome to Oh Hell No with Nicole.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Oh Hell No podcast. Today we have Vish Chatterji. He has a company. He's an entrepreneur. It is called Head and Heart Insights. It's a professional coaching services. Well, they provide professional coaching services. Let me say that. They do executive coaching, business advising, transformational coaching, coaching. Welcome, Vish. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, great to be on your show, Nicole. I'm very excited.
Yes, me too. So, I'm going to start asking you a bunch of questions, and some of them will be like, from when you were young. So I just like to get a good idea of who you are and how you evolved to the person that you are today. So you ready for that?
I'm ready. You want me to squirm a little bit with those childhood questions, huh?
No. So tell me about your upbringing. I read a little bit about you. So it says, I read that you were raised in an Indian family. So I wanted to know if you were raised here or if you were raised in India.
It's funny you asked that question. When I used to interview people for jobs, It's almost the first question I would ask. Like, so tell me, where'd you grow up? What was your life like before you showed up on your resume?
Wow.
Because I felt it just gave a lot of insight into why people are the way they are, or something unique about them. And I definitely had a very different childhood, a very unique childhood. And usually when people ask me where I'm from and I say, they sort of gloss over it. They just continue on because they don't want to go any deeper into it.
Wow.
But I'm Indian. My family's from India originally. My mother and father are both Bengali from the northeast of India. It's very close to Bangladesh and the Bay of Bengal. And in that region in Calcutta is where sort of generations and generations of my family have lived. And in the 70s, there was a really tough time in India. Indira Gandhi was the prime minister, and she instituted this time called the emergency, which just sort of like became almost like a very heavy socialist crackdown on everything. And so my family, my mother and father, wanting to leave that, moved to Hong Kong.
Wow.
Hong Kong was a place where, there were a lot of Indian immigrants. It was a British colony, but, off the coast of China, and was only a 4-hour flight to where my family lived in India. So Hong Kong became this great sort of outpost for them where they go live in Hong Kong, sort of start a different life, but still have access back to family. So I was born in Hong Kong to an Indian family.
So now I always have this conversation with my husband. It's like a running joke. So because you were born in Hong Kong, well, anyway, you're Indian, so you guys are Asian, right? That's how you on the forms. Wouldn't you check like Asia or something because it's like
it used to be Asian, but now they've further classified it into South Asian. So now if you say Asian, then they assume you're from, China or Japan or Korea.
Right.
And if you say South Asian, then it's India. But it's all Asia. We're all Asian.
Right.
From that part of the world.
Okay, so then this question wouldn't even be good for you. So, all right, so that's really interesting. So with that being the case, were there any expectations for you from your family about what they wanted you to do or become as an adult?
Yeah, I have this theory. See, these Indians left India at some period of time, let's say the 70s or the 80s or 90s or whenever. And that immigrant family, when they leave, they're sort of locked into that time and that culture and that way of thinking. While India was progressing and modernizing, the people that left at various times didn't progress or modernize. So my family, even though India had changed a lot, they still sort of clung to these older Indian ideals. So they wanted us to grow up, a more traditional way. We went to the temple every Sunday. My parents were very religious. They were, wanted me to either be an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer, and wanted to make sure that I had, a good job with a good salary and rise up the ranks. My mother and father were very enamored with corporations and companies, and the executive path was sort of, in a way, ordained for me in some ways. But the thing is, in Hong Kong, being a British colony, surrounded by China with all the Chinese influence, and then I went to a German school. So each of the international English medium schools were sort of sponsored by different countries. So I went to a German school where, even though my classes were in English, the culture of the school was very German. We had a lot of German teachers. There was a whole German section, like let's say there was a German stream and an English stream. So you could have all your instruction in German or all your instruction in English. But either way, even in the English stream, you had to learn German as well. So I had this juxtaposition of cultures, right? Indian culture at home, but Indian culture from the 70s, And then, this Hong Kong environment, which is very modern and Western thinking, but yet Chinese and, part of China. And then a German school where I had to learn German and then later on French. So sort of this mishmash of stuff. So I had a very different mindset to mom and dad. But we all we called ourselves triculture kids. And the triculture kids in Hong Kong all found ways to sort of stay under the radar within their home and live a completely different life outside of the home.
Wow. Yeah. But that's so amazing that you got to, so you speak German, right?
I do. I learned German for about 10 years as a child, along with French. And then at home, we spoke Bengali. My father and mother, when I was very young, when I was born, for those first 4 or 5 years before I went to school, we had what was called an ama. So in Hong Kong, labor was very cheap, and a lot of families had sort of a live-in nanny, so to say, and they were called amas, almost like a mother, but taking care of the kid. So we had a Chinese ama, as well as speaking Cantonese to me. And then my mom and dad speaking Hindi and Bengali at home. So when I first interviewed to go to school, I didn't really speak English well enough to get in. So around the age of 5, the school that I did, the German school, accepted me in with the condition that I would take intensive tutoring. So from the age of 5 or so, I had about 3 times a week a tutor come to the house and tutor me in English. And I watched a lot of TV. I watched a lot of cowboy movies. And I think that's where my love of America first started, was watching Westerns in Hong Kong.
Wow.
Family.
That is amazing. So when did you make the transition to come over to America?
So life in Hong Kong was good. I mean, it was a great existence. As a young kid, I got sort of free roam of the island. I think I took my first public bus when I was probably 9 years old. It was just a very safe place at that time, especially for expatriate kids. And everything was going along smooth, but my dad always had this, vision of me going to university in the U.S. one day. He said, "Son, one day you must go to America, and that has the best education." And you can't sort of drill that into our minds. And then around the 1980s, so in 1984, the British government signed an agreement with the Chinese government to hand Hong Kong back to China, because Hong Kong was always on a lease from China to the British. And that date was set for 1997. What happened was most of the people in Hong Kong felt like, okay, things aren't going to change. I mean, it's going to remain the way it is. Things will be fine. The Chinese government will let Hong Kong continue to be sort of this Western democratic free society, and we'll just live in, one country, two systems. But then in 1989, Tiananmen Square happened. And I remember watching on TV and seeing the scene that many of us saw, even from America, the tanks and the students. And there's just horrible scenes. And that was when people in Hong Kong really freaked out. I think that's when, 1989 was when people said, you know what, this is not going to work. Like the idea of freedom of speech and the idea of a democratic lifestyle and this, the open society that Hong Kong was, is not going to exist when the Chinese handover happens. And, people were scared. People were like, what if the government comes in and all of a sudden seizes everyone's bank accounts? Mm-hmm. They have all the authority and power to do that. And all of a sudden you have to live within this different regime. And so we started looking for places to emigrate, along with, hundreds and thousands of other Hong Kong people. And furthermore, the Chinese government had determined, and this was much after, that if you weren't of Chinese blood for many, many generations, they wouldn't give you a passport, which meant that as somebody born in Hong Kong, I would actually have no ability to travel anywhere after the handover. So in '89, a lot of people after that time applied for immigration to different countries, and my family decided to emigrate to Canada. Mm. And part of the reason was Canada and Australia were two very relatively easier countries to emigrate to, with very open immigration policies, and they wanted economic stimulus, and so they looked to immigrants as a way to provide that. And my dad, of course, saw Canada as a great stepping stone to the U.S. He said, "Oh, son, we'll move to Canada, and then from there you can jump to the U.S." And so we moved to Canada. We applied for immigration around '89. We got in papers in '91. In '91, we all moved back. We moved to Toronto. And so my mother, my father, and my two younger sisters, we all sort of started this new life in Canada. And that was sort of our first exposure to, living in North America.
Wow, you've lived in some great places. That's for sure.
Well,
So,
Toronto, interestingly enough, when I didn't really enjoy it. For whatever reason, maybe it was a time in my life. I was 15 years old, and I didn't. It felt like a very foreign place. I didn't feel very welcomed. I don't know. People have very different opinions of Canada, but for me, for whatever reason, that life stage or that time in my life, I just didn't feel at home. I mean, I really was very homesick for those years. And I went through high school in Canada, and then I started applying to universities. And of course, to honor my dad's wishes, I applied to universities in the U.S.
mm-hmm.
I remember my guidance counselor saying, "You won't get into any university in the U.S. You just apply to the Canadian schools." And I said, "What are you talking about? I got some of the top grades in every course in the school. Like I'm one of the top students here. I'm involved in sports and academics. I hold leadership roles. I think I have a good chance." And they just sort of discouraged it. And so that was another sort of bad flavor in my mouth. I did get in. In fact, I got into Northwestern's engineering program.
Nice.
And so I came to the U.S. literally on a student visa to study engineering at Northwestern. And I arrived at Northwestern. I arrived in the U.S. and man, I loved it. I really loved it. And I've felt that way ever since.
So back to the guidance counselor. Why do you think he was trying to discourage you from trying to go to the United States?
I think there's a bit of a, I don't want to be too politically incorrect, but I think there's sort of a bit of a, Canada-US chip on the shoulder. I mean, Canadians are obsessed with what's happening south of their border because, we are such a strong economic force for Canada. And I think Canadians are a smaller country, and they're very proud of their ideals and proud of their country and what it stands for. And I think sometimes they feel they're sort of, not really thought about much. I mean, Americans don't think about Canada very often, but Canadians think about the U.S. a lot.
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of that mentality that, why would you go there? We have amazing universities here in Canada. We have amazing education here. Why would you go there?
Right.
I think it's sort of the underlying sentiment if I look back on it.
Yeah, that sounds like that makes sense. So when you went to study engineering, how was that? Was that something that you were really passionate about, or were you just kind of going along with maybe what your parents said, this would be the best path for you?
A bit of both. I mean, I had always been, I was the kid that took things apart all the time. Like, I don't know how many things in the house I got in trouble for taking apart. I just get a screwdriver and take it apart and be in pieces. And I didn't always figure out how to put it back together.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in my college essay, I wrote a story about when my dad, when I was a kid, he bought me a bicycle. And he said, "Son, just here's your gift. It was the morning. Happy birthday. Here's your bicycle. But whatever you do, don't try and ride it until I get home from work. When I get home in the evening, I'll set it up for you, and then you'll be able to ride it." And of course, I didn't listen to him, and I tried to ride it, and I fell over. And so I got out the tools from the tool drawer, and I started taking the bicycle apart. And my dad came home and came in and saw this bike in pieces in the living room. He said, "Son, what did you do?" I said, "Every time I get on it, I fall off. I think there's a ghost in it, and I'm trying to find the ghost." And he's like, I told you to wait. When I got home, I was going to put the training wheels on for you."
Oh my gosh.
It's like, I was always like trying to dive into the bottom of the problem. Like, what is the problem? What's going on here? Let me take it all apart to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like engineering school was basically that discipline of learning how to solve a problem, get deep into the problem, take it apart, deconstruct it, and get to the root of it. And I loved engineering school. I mean, I went in and I got, I was crazy about cars to begin with. And while I was, I think in my towards the end of my freshman year, I met a guy who was doing his graduate studies, but happened to race a car on a quarter-mile oval racetrack outside of Chicago. So I asked him if I could, help him out with the car. And he said, "Well, what do you know about cars?" And I said, I don't know much, but I'd like to learn. I'll, whatever you tell me to do, I'll learn from you and I'll help you out. So I started wrenching on old Mustangs with this guy. He'd get an old Ford Mustang out of the junkyard, and we'd convert it into a race car, and then he'd go race on a quarter-mile oval. So here I am, this Indian boy from Hong Kong, from a German school, via Canada, all of a sudden in a redneck quarter-mile oval racetrack in the middle of Illinois, Rockford, Illinois, at Saturday night racing with all the rednecks.
Oh,
And
God.
it was crazy, but they took me in like I was, one of the gang, and I was
Right.
walking around the pits and repairing the cars and loud engines, and the driver Jesse who I was working for, he'd crash and catch on fire and come into the pits, and I get the fire extinguisher and put it out and cut out the sheet metal to get it out of the way of the tire and patch it back up and throw them back out on the track. And I really learned a lot about how to be mechanical and how to fix cars and how to relate to really rough, middle of America people, and I loved it. And then I'd finish my Saturday night racing, and then I'd come back all knuckles bloody and covered in grease, and I'd come back to college, to my dorm, to actually the fraternity, and there's like a fraternity party going on, and everyone's in this other world of American college life, and I'm all of a sudden like, okay, time to switch out of my coveralls and put on my party clothes and go hang out with everybody.
Wow. When you graduated from college, what did you do?
So I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering, and I was looking for different work. And around that time, this was in 99,
Mm-hmm.
and around that time, there was a lot of consulting companies picking up engineering students from engineering schools because of the problem-solving ability. So consulting was kind of the hot job to get into,
Mm-hmm.
and paid well. But I just felt like I wanted to do something real engineering. And I had gotten an opportunity through a contact through the school to do an internship at a company called Roush. And Roush, a lot of people know, is a racing company. They one of the largest NASCAR teams in America.
Mm-hmm.
They used to have 5 NASCARs at the time, so they're one of the big crews. And Jack Roush, the owner of Roush, funded his racing, passion by doing engineering work for the OEM, so for the major auto companies. So Roush was a company that was looking for people who were really good, technically speaking, from an engineering point of view, but also knew how to turn a wrench.
Mm.
And I'd, while I was in school and working at the racetrack, I was also, I went and took a mechanic school and became a certified mechanic to kind of go along with the mechanical engineering thing. So, I was deep into cars, right? Racing cars and wrenching on cars. And so Roush was a perfect fit. And so they offered me a job as a development engineer. And so what I did was I worked on products at Ford. So Ford Special Vehicle Team, which is a division of Ford that makes all their high horsepower vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
They would go to Roush and they'd say, okay, we've got this Ford Mustang. It's 300 horsepower. We want it to be 400 horsepower. You guys go figure it out. And so Roush was sort of this, sort of like their elite engineering team that would figure out how do we take this vehicle and add 100 horsepower to it. Should we change the engine? Should we change the camshaft? Should we add a supercharger? Do we change tires? Like, what are all the things we do? And so I was on this team that would basically look at the entire vehicle system and figure out, should we change the camshaft? Should we add a supercharger? And then change the software of the engine computer to make all those components work together. So it's really a systems engineering job, trying to figure out how do we meet this, marketing requirement,
Mm-hmm.
the technology and the engineering of it. So I worked on, the Mustang Cobra R. I worked on the SVT Mustang Cobra. I worked on Lightning pickup trucks. I worked on the Ford GT. I mean, all these really like exotic high horsepower cars. And, I would literally have a test vehicle that I would drive every day as my driver, and it would be filled with instrumentation and lights and gauges. And we drive these cars to Arizona for hot weather testing, to the mountains in Colorado for altitude testing, to Bemidji, Minnesota for minus 20 degree cold starts. So it was like a dream job for a car guy. Really.
Yeah, this sounds fascinating. So what made you decide that you didn't want to do that anymore?
So I had this insight at one point where, so I did feel, so I was in a group of people that were literally guys, I mean, all men,
Mm-hmm.
white men,
Mm-hmm.
all white men who grew up on farms and grew up fixing tractors, and then sort of went to engineering school, got an engineering degree, and were just, like very technical, very technically competent, very smart. But I felt a bit, out of place. Like I hear I'm this, I grew up in Hong Kong, I'm from an Indian family, but I'm in this very odd environment. And they always thought of me as one of the white guys. So they tell me all these jokes and things that I'm like, that's not appropriate. I'm one of those people that you're joking about, right?
Right.
They just didn't have room for me like to be anything other than one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I just felt a little out of place. I felt like I had a broader worldview. I had more sort of insight, and it just felt like this couldn't be my life. I couldn't end up retiring just being an engineer at, working on cars and in this sort of very Midwestern, provincial sort of environment.
Mm-hmm.
But the marketing people seemed really interesting. So the marketing people who made that decision, okay, we're going to make a 400 horsepower car, I'd look at them, they're all driving nice cars and they seem to make good money. And I thought, well, how do I become like one of them? Like, what do they have? And I found out that most of them were marketers and they'd, gone to business school. And the people who went to business school, the ones who had kind of the jobs that decided what the product would be. And so I applied to business schools and I put together a strong application. I had really good work experience and I'd led quite a few important projects on the Ford vehicles. And I got into University of Michigan, into a top 5 MBA school. And so I left that job. I left Roush really to go to business school and get an MBA. And that's where things really opened up for me. I started to feel like I was more sort of in the right crowd for me, the right sort of intellectual perspective, the right sort of combination of a broader perspective and understanding, more of a worldly existence. While I was in business school, I did projects all over the world. And that was sort of where I came to a decision point. Where am I going to go with this MBA? And again, funny how it works, the consulting companies were all recruiting MBAs very heavily.
Oh, God. Isn't that amazing how that works out?
So I thought, there's these consultants again, and now I've got my engineering. I got my engineering chops. I know real engineering. I engineered engines, actually. But now maybe it's time to try consulting. So I took an internship with a consulting firm, and they wined and dined us and flew us all over the place. I was doing a project for a company in Ohio, but there was a link of part of the project in India, so I was flying back and forth to India, staying at these luxury hotels and flying business class everywhere, and big expense account. And I thought, wow, this is a good life. But I think the car bug was still in there pretty deep. And I was trying to find a way to do the consulting work within the auto industry. And meanwhile, there are car companies that are recruiting, and Daimler and Chrysler, so Mercedes-Benz and Chrysler had just merged, and quite a few years before that, and they were looking to recruit, new hires. And I thought of interviewing at the different car companies. I interviewed at Ford, and I even remember I during my Ford interview, the HR person asked me, she said, "You really would live in Detroit?" I mean, she looked at me like I was, not thinking straight when I said, "Oh yeah, I'd love to live. I love cars." But then when I interviewed with Daimler Chrysler, they said, "Look, we have an international management program. It's sort of where we recruit our top executives and sort of groom them and cultivate them for senior leadership, and we think you'd be a good fit for this program." And so I applied for that program and went through a grueling interview process. They had us go through, I don't even know if I've come across that in my career again, another recruiting process like that, where we had these individual interviews and you get through the 3 rounds, and then they take the top 10 candidates out of the 50 people that applied and sequester us in a hotel for 2 days and then give us all these different problems to solve, and they would watch and rate how we interacted and how we solved problems, and from that they selected 3 of us. So
wow.
That job I took out of business school was part of Daimler Chrysler's, it was really a Daimler program for their new executives. And the word for it was the Internationale Nachwuchsgruppe, which if you translate it into English is the International New Blood Group. This is where they sort of bring in the new blood and sort of groom them for senior executive roles. And as part of that training, they had me for 2 years living in Detroit. I worked on hybrid vehicles for Daimler. Then they flew me to Stuttgart, and I worked in Stuttgart for about 5 months at the Mercedes Engineering Center. And then I was in Beijing for about 6 months working on product portfolio for China, deciding what vehicles we would build in China versus import into China for the Mercedes side. And then I went to Chrysler, did a small car stint in small car planning. So that was, for me, felt amazing. I flew on, Daimler's private company jet back and forth to Stuttgart every few weeks for training. There was one event where they took all the sort of the new blood people and they dropped us off in a chalet in the Black Forest, and we had, a bunch of cases of beer and food, and we just had to bond and get to know each other. And then we went on hikes in the forest and rappelling, and that's when I started to realize that here, at least in a German company, in Mercedes-Benz, they saw leadership in a completely different way than just the work.
Yeah.
And that was maybe my first exposure to understanding that, leadership is beyond just being competent in your job. There's more to it. And they had us on these training programs where we would learn negotiation skills, conflict resolution, human interaction, communication. So they really cultivated a lot of this sort of deep leadership, which to this day I think has been some of the most transformative learning that I've done, as a corporate person.
Right. Wow, that is really, really fascinating, because I'm just seeing how everything that you've learned and done could possibly prepare you for what you're doing today. So,
yeah, and prevent me from what I'm doing today, because it started to build these very deep grooves.
mm-hmm.
What I thought my identity was.
So tell us how that manifested itself. Like, how did you figure out that you didn't really know who you were, or that you needed to figure it out?
So there's a bunch of sort of fast forward from Chrysler. So Daimler and Chrysler split up.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw, when I looked around, that there were all these German executives, and I wasn't German. And that was clearly different. All the senior level people were Germans. But I looked at Chrysler's executive team, and I saw quite a mix of people, like men, women, different nationalities, all sorts of things. Whereas, Daimler was white men. It was German men. So I decided when the split happened that I would jump over to the Chrysler side and take on a role at Chrysler. So I joined Chrysler, and then I switched over, and I was a global product manager for small cars at Chrysler. And it was an amazing job. I would study people's psychologies all over the world and figure out what kind of car to build for those different markets. Amazing, right? Like psychology into engineering. It's sort of 1 foot in marketing, 1 foot in engineering, sort of like that dream I had at Roush, where I would get to be the guy making decisions on what vehicle we're going to build. Based on psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And that all went really well until 2008, when things got really rough in the auto industry. And I noticed, again, dad's conditioning. I want to get a big title, big job. I want to move. And when I got promoted to the manager level at Chrysler, everybody else at that level was 10, 15 years older than me. Mm. And when I was trying to figure out how do I get my next stripe, people are like, you got to put your time in. You got to and I'm like, I don't have the time. I need to move. And so and of course, things in the auto industry were really rough in 2008. So I jumped to a company in LA called Belkin, a tech company. And I just felt the tech industry had a lot of potential. I felt like I could grow a lot and get a lot of responsibility. Instead of these huge companies, I could go to a smaller company and make more of an impact. So I jumped to Belkin. I arrived in LA in 2008 as an entrepreneur in residence. And I started a division at Belkin. I ended up, sort of a one-man entrepreneur show. And started up their clean tech division. So it was called Conserve, and from there I built on basically a product line around home automation, and Belkin became known quite widely for their home automation technology called Wemo. I built that up. I ended up starting a division around iPad keyboards and all of this stuff where rather than building cars, building a Bluetooth keyboard for an iPad, or an energy-saving surge protector for home use, or a smartphone-controlled outlet. I mean, these things were all simpler products. They were quicker to build, a year to year and a half from design, sketch design on paper to actual off the assembly line. So I got to see and own and sort of run products from start to finish in a very accelerated way. Mm-hmm. So naturally, I progressed in my career and got promoted and got more senior responsibility a lot quicker than I did in the auto industry. And so now I felt like I was fulfilling my dream, and I was getting even more entrenched in, okay, now I got this title. And then I had a company through a headhunter reach out to me, a company in Orange County, Universal Electronics, for a director role. And I said, oh, great, I'm moving on. And they, it was a good salary, good director role, leading their product charge. And in the time that I was there, in the 2 years that I ran their advanced product group, we quintupled the stock price of the company. So then I thought, oh, wow. So now I got, now the next frontier, I'm reading about startups. I'm going to start a company. I believe that's my path, is to be a startup entrepreneur and be one of those stories. So, kind of like, big eyes, sort of dreaming, I exited out of Universal Electronics, took, cashed in all my options and stock and started to build my own company along with a co-founder. So we built a startup in the Internet of Things space. A technology that would monitor how devices are performing in the field and report that operating information back to the company, so that you could understand how people are actually using your products. So this is going back to my auto days. Like, rather than surveying customers and trying to understand what their needs are, just get the actual data of the products you're using and make better product decisions from that. So this is where I thought, okay, now I'm really like on that path, right? Mm-hmm. And it was this startup, and I feel like every entrepreneur goes through some sort of a major awakening. if there's nothing else that comes out of entrepreneurship, at least it's a major awakening. And in that time, we built the company, we built product, we started selling into customers, we started getting early revenue, and then investors got involved. And as investors started getting interested in our company, we had all sorts of strange dynamics start to happen, and particularly some of the investors did not like my co-founder. And they wanted me to get him off the board, get him out of the company and take it over myself. And so we went through, just awful stuff. I thought, okay, I'm the business guy. I'm going to do what's right for the business. And I think I was horrible. I was horrible. I don't think I was. I was horrible. I was awful to my co-founder. And I got him off the board and took his equity away and sort of restructured the company and took it in a different direction and started, getting committed capital. And along that way, I started to think, what the hell am I doing? Like this is not who I am. Yeah. And I started to think, when that money comes in, when it gets wired, this is how I have to operate. Like, this is who I have to be. And this is not really who I am. It just didn't feel right. And, when you have that sort of, in the Vedic philosophy, it's called a samvega moment. It's sort of when you start to realize, like, wait a minute, this all seems like an illusion. Like, what's the game here? There's something behind it. There's some reality behind this that I'm sort of feeling and sensing but not seeing. And around that time, my yoga teacher from India came to visit. And along this whole story that I just told, this whole story of executive roles and jumping into different parts of the world and all that. My entire career, I've had a yoga and meditation practice. It's sort of been my grounding force that I did every morning. And I met this teacher in the Himalayas. After I graduated from college, I went backpacking in the Himalayas. I went for a 10-day solo trek to kind of find myself. And along that journey, I fell a few days into it. I got hurt, and I crawled my way out of it to safety. And then through a series of events, ended up in an ashram in India, in Rishikesh, where this teacher, whose name is also Vish, one of those other coincidences, became my yoga teacher. So that's sort of where I started and learned yoga and kept it as a practice for all those sort of, years of career.
So let me ask you this. From all the years that you've, been building up your career, was that the first time that you found yourself having to make a decision like that, where you had to kind of go against someone that you worked closely with, built a company with, or did you face decisions like that before in your career?
All the time. And I was ruthless about it. Like, I always focused on the business and never really cared about the being nice or, worried about people's feelings. I just focused on the business, and I felt like if the business was successful, that's all that mattered.
Do you feel like that is part of success? Like, I have this conversation before with my husband, just talking about how some people climb the corporate ladder and what it takes to get to the place where, you see some people, they're very successful, they make a lot of money. And we talk about, like, you have to be ruthless. And do nice guys ever really get that far? What is your theory on that, being that you were someone who actually made it?
That's what I needed. Like, for me to get to the levels and the positions that I had, like, that's what I felt I needed to do. Mm-hmm. I didn't go another way. But I don't think that's the way for everybody at all. I think there's a way to be a nice guy and to be a good good, grounded person and be very successful. I just think it's scary. It's almost feels like if you're ruthless, it feels like the lowest risk route. Like, I know at least I'll hit the numbers.
Yeah.
But I had problems along the way. I mean, I had a lot of very challenging times, and I've had times where I had a senior executive at Belkin once tell me, he's like, Vish, you can't have that many people crying at the end of a meeting. You can't have everybody in tears all the time. And I would say to him, but I'm hitting the numbers. I delivered on time. Nobody else is delivering on time. Nobody's hitting the numbers. I'm doing it. And now you want me to keep everyone singing Kumbaya? Like, this is nuts.
Right.
So I rebelled against that approach, but now I have a very different perspective now.
Right.
I don't believe that at all. But at the time, that's all I knew, and that's what I felt like I had to do. And I fought so hard because I felt my whole identity and meaning was tied up in those roles.
Yeah.
I didn't feel there's any other reason for existence but to be a senior level corporate executive with a big title and a big salary and a big bonus.
Jeez.
So I was focused on a goal. And so then, we fast forward to, this whole startup mess and all that. And my yoga teacher who, along the way, he just observes and sees. And, I think one time I told him, I said, Vishwa, I'm having a lot of trouble with my business. It's been really hard. And he just looked at me and he said, and he calls me Vishwajit, my full name. He says, oh, Vishwajit, you do more yoga business and all business will be okay. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? More so I'm like, I said, oh, maybe I'll help you with your business. So I started advising him on his business and helping him out and, doing a little bit more, helping people. And along the way, he came to visit LA. This was about 2 years ago. And I would say this is when I really woke up. He came to LA and he kept getting invited to dinner by a woman named Gurmukh Khalsa. So she's a very famous Kundalini yoga teacher, a disciple of Yogi Bhajan. Mm-hmm. She sort of started one of the first ever yoga studios in LA. She was a teacher to Madonna and to Michael Jackson and to a lot of David Duchovny, like a lot of stars, Courtney Love. And so I was all of a sudden like, oh, this person has a good title. Like, she's a famous teacher and teaches all these people. Mm-hmm. And he got invited to this dinner with her. And he said, hey, Vish, do you want to come along? I said, yeah, sure. We go to this fancy house in the Hollywood Hills with all these yoga celebrities. I think the CEO of Wanderlust was there, and Gurmukh with her flowing robes and white, turban and his beautiful affect. And everybody's talking. And we're sort of, getting our dinner on Thai vegan dinner, of course, LA yoga crowd. And Vishwa introduces me to Gurmukh. Mm-hmm. And Gurmukh says, hi, Vish, nice to meet you. I said, oh, pleasure to meet you, Gurmukh. I've read so much about you. I'm honored to meet you. And she just looks at me. She says, so, Vish, where do you teach? And I kind of looked at her, and I looked behind me. I'm like, I looked over my shoulder. I said, are you talking to me? Teach? No, I'm not a teacher. I'm a business guy. I run companies. I run divisions. I start companies. I'm not a teacher. I'm a business executive. I said, I'm a student. I study under Vishwa. I'm a student of Vishwaketu's. And she just looked at me like almost deep into my soul. Like I gave the wrong answer. I mean, I felt like a school kid. And she just looked at me and she said, how can you not teach? How can you have all this experience and all this knowledge and all this wisdom? And by the way, she knows nothing about me. She just said that. I don't know how she knew.
Wow.
And she said, how can you not share this with the world? She said, you must teach. You must not die in this life just being a student. And then she kind of flitted off and filled up her plate with more food and disappeared.
I live for moments like that. Oh my God.
I'm sitting there like I had my soul chiropractically adjusted.
Wow.
And I'm stunned, right?
Yeah.
And so then Vishwa looks over at me and says, so Vishwajit, you come teach at my next workshop in Canada, okay? And I said, okay. So now I'm signed up to teach a workshop in Canada, right? So I'm like, oh, wow. So then, and funny how these things work. Like, this you sort of at a soul level all of a sudden discover, like, what? Whoa, what, where? And, meanwhile, my corporate startup executive identity is literally melting away. Like, it just set into motion a bunch of things. And my lead investor's wife got sick, and he called me from the hospital, the waiting room. He said, Vish, I don't think I can go through the investment. You're going to have to find another lead. And instead of being disappointed, I was kind of like looking up at the sky going, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is my graceful exit. And a few weeks later, a woman who got promoted to a director of product reached out to me out of the blue and said, hey, Vish, I just got, promoted to this director level of product, and I feel a little, it's a challenging role. I was wondering if you'd consider coaching me. And so all of a sudden I had a coaching client, and as I told people I was coaching, then somebody else said, oh, would you coach me? And all of a sudden I'm coaching people, and I had a few coaching clients, and meanwhile the startup is imploding. And I thought, every time I coach, I love it. I just feel like I'm me, and people feel like they're transformed. And every time I'm working on the startup, it's just misery. What am I doing with my life? And so I thought, well, what if I became just a coach? And to be honest, Nicole, I didn't know what coaching was. I was coaching all these people, but I didn't know what it was. And what I was doing was whatever. I just kind of made it up as I went, right?
Right.
Right? You fake it till you make it.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I was having impact, and it was making a difference. And I thought, you know what? I need to take this seriously. So I went, I applied to the program at UC Berkeley and did their executive coach training program, which was a phenomenal, life-changing experience that really, helped me understand how senior leadership in corporations is really driven from a heart-centered place. And when a leader can connect to their heart and their deeper potential, they can manifest that in an incredible way that brings not only business success, but happiness within the company as well. And so that's when I started to connect that, the way I've been doing it has been not the right way, not the optimal way. And then I went, and as part of my own I put my own coaching program together. I went and did my executive coach certification at Berkeley. Then I went to India and did my yoga teacher training, finally, after putting it off for decades with Vishwa.
Mm-hmm.
And funnily enough, as I was finishing my, there's all these coincidences, right? I finished off my yoga teacher training. I was going for a walk along the banks of the river Ganges in Rishikesh. And as I'm walking and the sun is setting, it's kind of a dusk setting, coming the other way is this woman in flowing white robes and a turban.
Oh, God. Not the same lady.
And I'm like, Gurmukh, what are you doing here? She's like, oh, I'm here for the International Yoga Festival, and it happens to be starting this week. I said, no way. I said, I met you in LA at this dinner with, Vishwa Ketu, and you said some words to me that completely transformed my life, and you told me to not die being a student in this life, and now here I'm finishing my yoga teacher training. And she just lit up and gave me this huge hug and said, I'm so proud of you. And I said, I'm graduating in a few days. She said, I will be there. So I have Gurmukh at my yoga teacher training graduation give me a big blessing at the ashram. That
is so nice.
To Rishikesh. And the timing of it, she does come to Rishikesh, but the timing to meet her on the banks of the river, the Ganges River, right before my graduation. And then so I finished my yoga teacher training, and then I went down to the Chopra Center in Carlsbad in San Diego, and I studied their Ayurveda instructor program, mm-hmm. which is Indian mind-body medicine system. And then I also studied to be a meditation instructor. And along the way, I also, as I got deeper into Ayurveda, I started studying under the chief medical advisor to the Deepak Chopra Center, a guy named Dr. Suhas. And I just, was enamored with this guy. And he started teaching me Vedic astrology. So I started to understand sort of this more esoteric side of it all. Mm-hmm. And I realized that, there's the coaching paradigm, which is all about manifesting human potential. Then there's the entire Vedic system from ancient India, which is all about manifesting human potential through these different disciplines. The yoga discipline, the Ayurveda discipline, the mind-body medicine part, the meditation discipline, the astrology discipline, and they all come together as tools in this complete holistic framework to help you manifest your full potential. And as I started understanding this, I really discovered that I'm not on this planet to be a senior corporate executive ruthlessly beating people up to get my way. I'm here to help people find their way. I'm here to help somebody connect to their inner potential and their inner power and help them find their way through this difficult life that we all navigate through somehow. So I'm sort of this guide now, this enabler of extraordinary living. And I've started to really understand that and manifest it. And I believe that all of the techniques that are out there in some way help people on that journey. But I feel like my sort of combination of, being an ex-business guy, being an ex-business executive, having an MBA, coming from the Western leadership model and Western coaching, and then combining a little bit of this Eastern philosophy of human potential and bringing it together, it's a very powerful combination. So I'm that intersection now of my life of business and spirituality meeting. Like, how do we take spiritual traditions and use it towards success in business specifically? Because that's where I have background and understanding.
Wow. So tell me what you learned from your business side. Like, what was the biggest lesson that you learned there that you take with you today in, your coaching and just your life in general?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is that, we're all born with a different set of skills and different talents and different challenges. And, you can't pretend to be somebody else. You are who you are. And you can hide from it for a while. And maybe you hide for your whole life. And then on your deathbed, you figure it out. I'm blessed that I figured it out, kind of midlife. But I think it's, the most important thing that I think for the business community to understand is a lot of business leaders are in very, very powerful positions and very impactful positions that affect lots and lots of people. They affect humanity and society. Yeah. And that's a responsibility that people don't really realize or take seriously. Yeah. They're sort of so focused on getting their bonus and getting their paycheck and getting their hitting their targets and goals. They don't realize the broader reason for all this. And I think it's very important for people to have a clear sense of purpose. Like, why are you here? What are you here to do? And really honing in on what that purpose is, and then understanding how your work fits and serves that purpose. And if it fits that purpose, fantastic, great. And if it doesn't fit that purpose, that's okay. You still have to earn a living, but do something that indulges your higher purpose as well. So you live this balanced way, and then you start to make decisions on a more, holistic humanitarian point of view. They say in the astrology tradition that there's 4 aims of life. There's artha, kama, dharma, and moksha. These 4 aims. And the 4 aims translate into, one of them is dharma, which is your higher purpose. One of them is artha, which is earning a living. The other is kama, which is pleasure. You probably heard from the Kama Sutra, right? Just enjoyment. And then moksha is sort of freedom, liberation. And all of these have to be cultivated and indulged in a balanced way. So if all you ever do, like my life was all about work, artha, earning. All that I focused on was how much am I making and where am I, right? Mm-hmm. And I, at the detriment of family life, social life, having fun, I was too serious on that path. And I didn't really have a spiritual path. I just sort of was secondary, in a lot of ways. But I think now I start to understand, and as I coach people, like, to have all these in balance. Like, yes, it's only right that you work to make a living. You have to have a roof over your head. And you have to, be able to buy yourself nice things and live a happy, comfortable life in order to have a foundation for these other things. Then indulge in your higher calling, whatever that is. Figure it out and indulge in it somewhat. If you're blessed, maybe you get to indulge in your higher calling and make a living from it. So not everyone's blessed that way. And then have some fun. Like, go out and have fun. Like, that's important. That's a pursuit of life. We call it the pursuit of happiness, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So they line up. So I think that's what I've learned now, is that don't do business at the detriment of everything else in your life. Because at the end of the day, you may make a lot of money, but you're not going to be fulfilled, and you won't have as much of an impact on your own journey and society around you.
Yeah, that is so amazing. I love that. Oh my God. So, what challenges do you face when you go into a corporate environment and you are trying to coach these people and to get them to understand what you just shared with me? What would you say is the most challenging part of that?
I mean, I have to meet people where they're at, right? So if somebody says to me, look, we're not hitting the margins we need to hit on this business, then I'm going to say, well, let's look at the spreadsheet, right? Let's get it open. And I can look at the spreadsheet and look at the P&L, look at the entire income statement, figure out, put our heads together and partner and say, okay, what's going on here? What do you think is driving this? What do you think is driving this? And maybe that's the only level we stay at, and that's okay. But it's having that professional. I'm sort of acting as a professional sounding board for somebody to in a safe way ask. That's maybe there's something they don't understand in the numbers, and now we're going to sort of get into that. But a lot of times behind the numbers, there's behavioral things, right? There's behavioral challenges that are going on. And so sometimes, okay, the sales guy, every time I talk to him, it's a mess. Our meetings always blah. Okay, so now we're getting to sort of the human behavior part of it. And so we've gone from coaching on the Excel spreadsheet to coaching around human behavior. And then from there, all of a sudden, I had a client this morning where the feelings that he has in those intense meetings are feelings that I was able to help him understand were feelings he had in his childhood even. So now how are these sort of playground politics showing up in the workplace? And how are you, as a leader, how is that getting in your way? And, I don't want to get into mommy daddy stuff, but how are you going to use this, the bright side of the mommy daddy stuff to get through your business challenge, not let it hold you back? And so now we're sort of getting into a little bit more esoteric. And, this particular individual is having challenges with confrontation. Now, I don't want to get into, some yoga, esoteric, chart reading and all that, but I can tell, the guys need some more sort of warrior archetype energy to sort of focus on. Mm-hmm. So rather than telling him, okay, you need to start chanting a Shiva mantra, or I said, what is your archetype of a warrior? What does a warrior look like to you? And he said something from his tradition. I said, okay, that's something you need to think about. And you need to sort of channel that. And when you're in that discussion, the moment you feel that way and that feeling comes up, you need to think about that archetype and be it, right? So now I never had to get into any, crazy esoteric stuff, but I was able to meet that client where he was at. Now, other clients who are, where all of a sudden I bring something, they're like, oh yeah, I've heard about that. And all of a sudden now we're like, doing an astrology reading. And, I had a few clients where we're doing a purpose statement, a mission statement, and at an intuitive level, they feel really good about the mission statement, but then they logic themselves out of it. Mm-hmm. So now I do, pull up their birth chart, and in the chart, it sort of lines up with the thing they came up with. So it's just like, okay, here's in a way, a SWOT analysis of what you're trying to do here: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Mm-hmm. And here's where it lines up with what you're thinking. It's just another tool. So I think the challenge is, for me, is, just understanding where people are at and going the speed that they're comfortable at. And not sort of pulling them too deeply, when they're not ready for it.
Yeah. I mean, what you're doing to me is so important, because just being an employee and being more of like a worker bee, because I used to think that I wanted to climb the corporate ladder and be this person that was like jet setting and doing this and doing that, but I really don't. That's not what I want, And I figured that out, but I'm still on that journey to figure out, well, what is my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? Where do I fit in here? I can't just be doing what I'm doing professionally for the rest of my life. Like, this doesn't fulfill me, So but going to work and dealing with people every day, people who are climbing the corporate ladder, people who are managing me and having these meetings and doing these things, it is so important, the knowledge that you're giving these people, to help them do their jobs better, more effectively, and dealing with people. It's really important. I mean, I don't know. I think
it has so many positive repercussions on society, right? Because a happy company with happy employees does good things for the world. And I'm not I subscribe to the corporate vehicle. I think it's an amazing vehicle to bring people together in a very productive, powerful way to do amazing things. I mean, the company structure, as we know it in America, a corporation can do incredible things. It can harness such an incredible amount of innovation and creativity and power, but it can also go really badly, right?
Yeah.
There's a good side to it too. And so I really honor that structure. And I think that, within that structure, not only do amazing things happen for society, right? Look at all the technology we're using right now to communicate. I mean, this is the result of collective innovation. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. At the same time, how can people that work in those corporations understand how they fit into that, how they're relevant in that whole bigger picture, and what, how it lines up with their own personal journey and goals? Companies don't have to be a holding pot of frustrated people. It doesn't have to be that way, but it is that way.
Yeah.
and I just don't see the place for it. I think a company should be a holding pot of very creative, innovative people who just love being there. And it should be like that everywhere. But, senior leadership, I mean, they have all their things that come in, and some of their personal challenges that they haven't quite resolved show up in the workplace, and they affect a lot of the people that work for them. And I feel like if I can help an executive be more authentic and lead from the heart and really inspire, naturally the whole workplace starts to become inspired because of that power figure sort of connecting to their heart center.
Absolutely. And I think that what you said too earlier about the training that you received when you were with that company on being in management, that's important because a lot of people don't get that. They get promoted because they produce, right? But do we really know if they're leaders and if they can lead, if they can, if they have those skills? Most times they don't. So I think it's really important that if you are going to put someone in a leadership position, that you do give them some type of, training to go along with that, just to help them along the way, because it's not easy leading people.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Nicole. I mean, it's tough, it's soft, it's not tangible, it's scary, it's risky. You make mistakes along the way,
right?
But it's important that people do have a good foundation, and I think where I'm trying to take it a little further is that we should really understand a person's unique strengths and weaknesses, and based on that, start to train them on the areas where they need some help. Because some people, it's not a one size fits all. I think that's a lot of times broken in training, is that the one size fits all approach doesn't work, because we aren't one size. We're all different. We all lead in different ways. We all have different challenges that we're trying to overcome, and so understanding sort of our unique approach, I think is powerful. And there's all these tools, like there's the Myers-Briggs, and there's the Strengths Finder, and Gallup. I mean, all these things which I think sort of people gravitate towards. But I've found, and I think this will be my unique approach, is using Ayurveda, which is a mind-body medicine system of ancient India, and it sort of classifies people into 3 different mind-body constitutions and some combination of those. And those mind-body constitutions end up determining how you react in times of stress, how you lead, how you relate to other people, how you handle your work. And based on the type of work you're doing, can imbalance certain mind-body constitutions more than others. So if you have a certain mind-body constitution, you do a certain type of work, then it requires a different lifestyle, a different diet choice to then balance that particular work. So it gets more personalized that way. Is that, I was so the 3 constitutions of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Vata is the sort of very airy element, Pitta is the very fiery, and Kapha is sort of earthy. And I was very fiery, so I was the enraged all the time. And Pitta people, fiery element people, tend to get very red. They get pimples a lot. They get irritations. They get easily agitated and angry, critical, judgmental. And I found that I was yelling and screaming and judgmental and banging my fist on the desk all the time. And
really?
That's how I operated.
I can't even imagine you being like that.
And so I got told by this Belkin leader that, hey, you need to really dial it down. You're upsetting a lot of people. And I'm like, what, you want everyone kumbayaing? Like, we're hitting our number. Like, I went through all that. And then I happened to pick up a book on Ayurveda, and I figured out that I'm a Pitta, fiery, and the things that Pitta should avoid, I was doing. So here I am, all fired up at work, and one of the things that fires up a Pitta is a lot of work. If you have too many things to do in a short amount of time, too many to-do items, that inflames Pitta. If you do a lot of knowledge work, a lot of thinking and brain work, that inflames it. If you do a lot of competitive sports, and I was doing all competitive sports. If you drink a lot of red wine, inflames it. Red meat inflames it. So I was doing all of the activities that inflame the fire element that was part of my work. So I just did some very simple things to cool down. I started swimming in the ocean, swimming in the pool, cycling, gardening, drinking white wine instead of red wine, eating a little bit more white meat instead of red meat. Little by little, as I made these adjustments, I found I literally cooled down. I mean, it just calmed down. Like, I all of a sudden wasn't getting as upset and as angry as often. And so I started to realize that you can, depending on the work you're doing and what element is out of balance, you can balance it with diet and lifestyle and, recreation choices. So I'm starting to do that a little bit in the corporate setting now. I've got some pretty large, major companies that I'm doing their executive retreats.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do 50 to 100 people, sometimes 200 people, where I'll train them on understanding their mind-body constitution, how it relates to their work, and then what lifestyle and diet choices they should make to help balance that so they can operate more effectively.
Wow. So why do you think people have so much trouble figuring out how to find their purpose?
It's not something you're told to think about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not like your mom and dad are saying, hey, have you figured out your purpose? It's usually mom and dad are like, when are you going to get a job? And, what kind of job are you going to get? And what are you going to study? I mean, it's not like your friends, when you're with friends and peers, they'll say, where are you working? Or what do you do? Or, they're always asking, like, why are you here? What is your purpose?
Yeah.
But it is showing up. I'm actually also a public health official. So I'm on the board of directors of our Beach Cities Health District here in Redondo Beach, Hermosa Beach, and Manhattan Beach. And one of the things that the health district does is it puts in all these programs into the community to improve overall health. And a very inspirational project for the Beach Cities Health District was an effort called the Blue Zones, done by a National Geographic researcher, where he went around the world and identified the happiest and longest lived populations on the planet. And he found 4 regions of the world where people live the longest and happiest lives. And he tried to identify the common traits amongst those 4 groups of people. And he found 9 things that they all did in common that led to statistically significant data around longevity and happiness. And there were things about, eating a certain way, moving naturally and being a part of a community and, having a drink, at 5 and decompressing the day. There's sort of these different principles. They called the Power 9 principles. Mm-hmm. But one of the principles was living with a clear sense of purpose. And so this research started to spawn a whole bunch of research on longevity and stress reduction and happiness correlated to purpose. And so, from a Western medical science point of view, we have now proven that when you live with a clear sense of purpose, you live longer and happier life, and you're less susceptible to disease. From the yoga tradition, the Vedic tradition of ancient India, that was known as dharma. If you didn't live to your dharma, you would be a frustrated person, and you'd have all sorts of susceptibility to illness and disease. And so I think it's known, and it feels good when you have a sense of purpose, but it feels like something that's elusive and difficult. But it doesn't take long. I mean, you get a decent coach and sit down with them, and probably in 1 or 2 sessions, you'll have a pretty clear sense of purpose. And it may change along the way, but that's okay. At least you have something to work with, right? Yeah. But to live a purposeless life, mm-hmm. It's tough. I mean, even for me, I didn't know my true purpose, but I had one. It's to be a senior executive and make lots of money. Yeah. Fine. It drove me through a lot of stuff, right? It carried me through a lot of really difficult times. And now as I refined and came to this purpose, which is, I exist to help people find their way, through ancient Vedic teachings and Western business management techniques, it feels good. Like, I'm like, all right, that feels good. It feels right. It gives me a sort of a guiding rod through life.
So I can say that you are living your purpose, right?
Yes.
So do you still do anything that allows you to, dabble with cars? Because I know that you love cars based on, just the conversation.
I had a client that was an automotive suspension maker that wanted, I'm still in discussion with to coach their senior executive team. Mm-hmm. So that's my link to the auto industry. I have a 1973 MG that I tinker with once in a while, but I've got 3 young kids and busy family life, so there isn't a lot of time to tinker as I used to.
Yeah.
But I would say that what's underneath it, like what was it that I loved about cars? I actually loved the tinkering and the fixing part of it. I loved to take things apart and fix them. It's like that ghost in the bicycle. Like, I liked deconstructing, getting to the root of it.
Right.
And I'm finding that that's what I'm doing a lot of times in coaching. Like, I'm helping somebody, with their own intelligence deconstruct a problem down to its basic nuts and bolts and then reconstruct a path forward from it. So it's almost like taking it apart and getting to the root of the problem. I do a lot of home repair as well. I love to fix things around the house. There's no such thing as a honey-do list in my house, because as soon as it's on the list, I'm on it, because I love it. I'm like, oh, I get to fix something and take it apart and put it back together and make it better. So yeah, I think the root of it has always been the taking things apart and fixing them, and it's manifesting in different ways, not necessarily on an automobile.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. I think that I wrote that down when you said that, and I was like, he's doing that, with his business. So, you have to share an oh hell no moment with us. It could be something from your past, something from, your present. It's a moment where you had to pause and say, oh hell no, that did not just happen. It could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing, but it's just a moment.
I got one. It's one that was another turning point. It was a very warm, sunny day in Orange County. Sun shining bright, and I got a call from the CEO's admin, the administrative assistant. She said, he wants to see you up in the office. I said, oh, cool. Just, brought the company to a great place, and he's probably going to give me a raise or a bonus or a promotion. It's very exciting. And so I took the elevator up. I went up to this beautiful office, gorgeous view, and walnut burled table. And I sat at the table, and we started some conversation around amplifiers and speakers. Is kind of one thing we used to bond on. He said, you've done an amazing job here, Vish. We're looking at you for senior management. You definitely have incredible potential here. But things are good now. We've done really well, and I was wondering, I think you've got to develop a few skills here. And I said, oh, what are they? It's like my plan here. Like, yeah, well, what do you need me to do in order to get to that next level? He said, like when we're in meetings and stuff, you don't have to argue on every time something doesn't quite fit, where you want to take it. You don't have to argue against it. And I kind of looked at him, and as I read between the lines, I think he was asking me to be a yes man. And in my head, I thought, oh, hell no.
Yeah.
And about 6 months later, I left the company.
Wow. You were no joke, Vish. Damn.
So I realized I'm not cut out for this. I'm not the right guy.
Yeah, it's hard to do that, but some people do it.
A lot of people do it. I've seen that a lot.
So this was such an insightful conversation. You'll never really know how insightful this is for me, because I talk about stuff like this every day with people. And it's just like, especially today, I was having a conversation with a coworker about, this very same thing about people climbing the corporate ladder and what do you have to do and how do you have to be and what, So to have this conversation with you, it was just really, really amazing for me. And I use that word all the time because it's just so amazing. I don't know what else to say. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story with us. And I want you to tell everyone, where they can keep up with you, where they can check out your website and see what you're doing and what you offer.
Yeah, so the name of my company is Head and Heart Insights. And I really, it works on so many levels, because I really believe we have intelligence in our head, but we also have intelligence in our heart. And we have to link the head and heart together in order to have real insight. And so Head and Heart Insights is the name of the company, and my website is headandheartinsights.com. And you can read about my background there. I'm also on Facebook, I'm based in Southern California in Los Angeles, but I work with people all over the world. I have clients in different corners of the globe, and I work over Skype and FaceTime and one-on-one. And I do all sorts of public speaking engagements as well. I go out and speak and talk about these different topics. And I'm also writing. So there's kind of a combination of things that I'm doing.
Yeah, that would be really great. I would love to read a book from you. I need some help.